So welcome, Matthew. I am excited to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate the invite.
Yeah. So we met through the Palm Harbor Library, and I'm excited to. You're the director of the Palm Harbor Library for the last 8 months. We were just talking about now.
8 months. Yeah, I had to do a little bit of math. I realized it was not 7. It was actually 8 months.
8 months. So how did you? Let's go back to the beginning, like we were kind of just touching on. But like, how did you get your start in libraries?
Right. And I should, put a qualifying statement on saying we met through the library because you were dragooned into participating in the Palm Harbor Library Endowment Foundation board. And we thank you very much for giving up your time to do that.
For sure.
And I was just kind of telling you a little bit about how when I was young and very involved in a whole lot of things and very passionate about writing music and writing plays, and went off to DePaul University in Chicago, one of the few sort of undergraduate conservatories that existed for that kind of thing. And my first day on campus, I think I was sized up by the work study office at DePaul, and they said, he belongs in the library, and sent me over there. And I, never worked or volunteered in a library or anything like that. And most of the reading that I did when I was a kid was like from garage sale books that my parents would go buy, things like Choose Your Own Adventure and, and that kind of thing. So I was always a little bit of a reader, but I only spent a little bit of time in public libraries and nothing in academic libraries. It was my first time there at the college. So I went there, and over time, I kind of got wooed away from this life of arts and creating, creating plays and actually eventually becoming a producer and forming a small nonprofit theater. But as I was doing that, I was working my way up through the DePaul Library. And the people I met there were, as I was saying, kind of like quirky and brilliant, but also very funny, and had a very, like, kind of a wide mix of people, and really just brought me in to see what amazing work goes into the creation of records and collections and services for that was an academic library, but has a strong, crossover to public. And it was a calling. It was beautiful. It was showing me how methodology and meticulousness, but also a little bit of creativity, mixed with hard work and collaboration. These words I wasn't really labeling at the time, but I was just taking it all in. Could make a big difference for a learner or for somebody who was looking for some answers for something in their life.
So you're going to college, and you're going to what were you going to study? Like, what was your plan?
I was studying playwriting. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't sleep much, not because I have a hard time sleeping, but I just sleep short amounts of time. So now I've worked my way up to about 5 or 6 hours a night, but back then I only slept like 3 hours a night.
Yeah.
I just have always been wired that way. I don't know why. And so at the time I was working like multiple jobs at the library and at the theater conservatory that I was in, and it just bit by bit the library just kind of took over. And so when I was sort of halfway through my degree, I learned, if I get a full-time job here at the library, I can get my tuition paid for. And I asked my supervisor's supervisor, what did you get your graduate degree in? She said, I got it in nonprofit administration. I was like, that sounds good. So I went and just like in a year and change, like that. No, I got my theater degree, and then I went on to and got that. But then I was like so solidly in the library world and being fueled by it that I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to go on for a library science degree. So not sleeping back then really paid off.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there's no way I could have made it working full time and trying to do that and figuring out life in Chicago. I just gotten married to my wife, who I met in Gainesville, Florida, before all that happened.
Yeah.
That's where my father had retired to after being 20 years in the Air Force. And figuring out married life and running that theater that nonprofit theater so I can't, looking back, I'm like, what the heck? I mean, how could that kid have done all that stuff? Well, I guess if you don't sleep, that's the answer.
You get a little more time.
Exactly.
What was your first job in the library? What did you do?
Well, so yeah, that was all behind the scenes at the library in Chicago, the DePaul University Library in Chicago. And so cataloging, acquisitions, collection development, serials, these are all the kind of things that go into building a collection and some services for a library that nobody ever sees, nobody ever really knows about.
Yeah.
And so when you think about cataloging, you're talking about like machine readable records that have fields and subfields, and some of them are based on kind of accepted rules that are adopted through sometimes internationally, but definitely in North America. And then occasionally you'll do what's called original cataloging, where you kind of have to make it up. And you have to
Okay.
do that sort of based on, what you've learned so far and what things are out there, but sometimes just figuring out what people might be looking for. There's a
Yeah.
lot that goes into that, and people don't really realize, but it's the reason you can find things and discover things when you still walk into a library and are looking at the shelves and realize, oh, I didn't realize that was something I could learn about or study or read about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So growing up, you never really were or went to libraries or involved in libraries at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'd go to my school library, I think, to check
Yeah.
out books, and then
Yeah.
occasionally to the public library. But usually my parents were just like, "Oh, let's just go to the garage sale," and there'd
To get
always be books there.
books.
People were
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
getting rid of their books.
Yeah.
We get so many donations at the Palm Harbor Library. I cannot even tell you. You come by sometime and you'll just see like the volumes and volumes and volumes of people are getting rid of. Sometimes in pristine, actually more often than not in pristine condition.
Cool.
But once you've read it, unless you're planning on reading it again in a year or a few years, time to pass it along, pay it forward.
Yeah.
So that's most of where I did my reading growing up, was just those garage sale books. Choose your own adventure. And then I grew up Jewish, so there was certain authors I was drawn to because of that. And like Chaim Potok wrote, The Chosen is his big famous book, and my favorite book of all time. I had to kind of reread it a couple of years ago to see, okay, is this really still my favorite, or am I just telling people that? It's called My Name is Asher Lev.
Okay.
And it's just amazing, a book about this gifted painter who is at odds with his Orthodox Jewish upbringing. Now, I didn't really relate to painting because my artistry in that regard is very, very terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I didn't grow up Orthodox, and so I didn't really relate to that world. But somehow the story just was very engaging. I think it's the idea of fitting in. And we all struggle with that, and finding out like, who are we in this world, and we want to label ourselves but not label ourselves, and we want to connect with other people, but we also want to be our own person. It's a very that I found a very relatable thing.
Cool. Did you grow up reading a lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say I think my wife puts me to shame.
Oh,
As a matter
yeah.
of fact, as a librarian for now about 25 years, she calls me her dealer.
Yeah.
And because I read slow, I
That's me
take it
too,
all.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
take it all in. And now that I'm reading, now when I read, I kind of do a mix. I'll pick up a print book occasionally, but oftentimes I'm on Libby, which is one of the ebook platforms that most libraries offer, including Palm Harbor.
Okay.
Or I'll do an audiobook or something like that. Or, as we were talking about before, and occasionally, because I listen to your podcast and I listen to other podcasts, but occasionally it's nice just to have quiet time too. And so I have like a 40 minute drive to work every day, to and from. And so sometimes I don't know how to meditate, but that's sort of my own version of meditating.
Silence. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. That's all you need. What's the importance of, I guess before I ask that, like, how long have you been involved in libraries now, and in different states too, right?
In different states, yeah. I started in Chicago, Illinois,
Okay.
and I worked in multiple different jobs at DePaul, and got really involved at the Illinois State Library Association. And I also volunteered. That was my first time volunteering as like an intern at the Harold Washington Library Center. If you ever go to Chicago, it's worth a visit. It's this huge, big, and the city blocks in Chicago are huge. So it's takes up an entire city block, and it's like 5 stories, and
Wow.
it's a beautiful, like 100-year-old building, and it's sort of the central library for Chicago Public Libraries. Then I went to go intern there, and I met a woman named Margaret Keir, and she was one of the chief librarians there. And she said, "Well, we don't really have interns. We don't have like an internship program." I said, "Well, I'll do a good job. I'll just I'll give you 100 hours of free labor. I'll learn and I'll help out, and occasionally I'll pleasantly surprise you."
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, sounds good. So she could kind of on the spot created this internship for me. And even though that was never my plan, was to kind of force my way in or anything like that, it was just an idea that I had that I thought, oh, this makes a lot of sense to me. And it was a good lesson for me of saying, like, just because the thing doesn't exist or the opportunity
Mm,
doesn't exist, doesn't mean you can't create it. It doesn't mean you can't explore it or ask somebody to consider it.
mhm,
And that's how things, that's how things originate.
mhm. Yeah,
Um,
I love that. So this is what I wanted to ask you was what's the importance of libraries for communities?
there's a great book. I'm gonna forget the name of the author, but it's called Palaces of the People, or Palaces for the People, and it probably does a better job of anything that I could say about what impact libraries have.
Yeah.
But I can cite one person that I think would demonstrate it. There's a person named Todd Chavez. He's the library dean or the director of libraries over at University of South Florida. I went to go see him speak at the 50th anniversary of the University of South Florida Library School anniversary. And he was talking about the organic relationship of libraries to their community. And that could be in any kind of library because there's a lot of different kinds. There's public,
Mhm.
obviously, that's my world now. Academic, meaning college, and then there's law and medical and corporate and other different kinds of special libraries. But there's always a relationship there. And what makes libraries notoriously hard to describe and promote is the fact that they do a lot. I can tell you my library, even though it's not the biggest library in the area, does way more than I'll ever be able to memorize or know,
Mhm.
even
Yeah.
on a daily or weekly basis.
Yeah.
And they change, they evolve. They again that organic relationship with the community informs what kinds of things happen there. So it becomes sort of a community space where people can, yes, of course, learn and recreationally read. We all know, okay, yeah, story times for kids and that kind of thing. But there's also things like what we have at Palm Harbor, like the Seed Library and the Musical Garden and the Gaming Center.
Mhm.
And we have a genealogy center, and we have the Palm Harbor History Museum comes to do lectures every month. And there's a an anime club for teens, and there's the kind of list that goes on and on. And all of those things were not there at the start. They developed, they grew, they evolved out of this relationship we have with the community, realizing, oh, we've got this expertise. We have people who need this kind of thing, and
Mhm.
that Venn diagram results in a library space or program or service.
Mhm.
And so the impact is maybe sometimes hard to measure, but it has to do with filling gaps. What is missing in the community? And if I have one vision for the library, it has to do with that, getting to know, um, mm, getting to a place where people understand if there's something they need or want in their lives, that the library is one of the first things that they think of.
Yeah.
That would be my sort of ultimate vision for Palm Harbor Library, any library that I was
Yeah.
director of or a part of. And it may take us a while to get there, and maybe we'll never get there because again, it's hard to kind of describe this thing that does a whole bunch of things, and maybe that thing will mean something to you. But it's like I was saying before, sometimes those opportunities are just waiting to be created.
Mhm.
And we don't even know what some of those are going to be yet.
Yeah. It's funny like you mentioned that because I think before I started the podcast and was like looking for events or things happening in the Palm Harbor area, like my thoughts and visions of a library was just like books and you go there and you read or take something out, take a copy of a book out um and then I learned about the Palm Harbor Library and like you mentioned it, like all the different things that they provide for the community. Like there's a ton, right? For all different age groups.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is interesting like how much the libraries can provide and how much they can do for a community. Is there a difference between and maybe it's just like between each library, so like the Palm Harbor Library may be different than Clearwater or something, but is there any major difference between states that you've worked in and experienced libraries in?
That's a good question. When I worked in Illinois, I was really just at the DePaul University Library, and then that internship I did at Harold Washington Library Center. Um, and I would say it was a long time ago, and um, you know, uh, I think I think it's hard for me to kind of connect those dots a little bit. There's always this sort of common base of like, there's a collection and a development policy that goes into that collection. And there's certain kinds of services when people want to do research, whether or not it's like sort of serious academic, like heavy research, or if it's
Mm-hmm.
just something they want to do to get a answer to a question. Um, so I would say the differences from state to state probably have more to do with how they're supported than how they function. And that support can mean funding. It can mean engagement from the community. It can have to do with the sort of makeup of the community, because obviously some are rural and some are more urban.
Mm-hmm.
And here in Florida, we have lots of both. Um, and I think that's really what differs from state to state in terms of sort of the balance of things. There's some, like Illinois is incredibly supportive of libraries when it comes to advocacy and making sure that, freedom to read and certain principles that are important to librarianship are intact. And I think even to the point of kind of legally being protected in that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely not always the case here in Florida. There's
Yeah.
lots of issues that come up where there's a disconnect between parts of the community, the library itself, local leaders or politicians, and there that disconnect sometimes can feel severe. But Florida is not the only place that happens,
Right.
and I bring it up because it's a thing, and it's happened, happened quite a lot over time. But I should say also, as somebody who's a leader in the library community, that it's never like, from people looking in from the outside, this is not an overwhelming part of our lives. Um, uh, there are times that become more challenging than others, but the sort of beacon that drives us all forward when it comes to giving people what it is that they're looking for, in all those different buckets of, again, recreation and passion and connecting with other people in the community,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the learning piece of it.
Yeah.
That's really what drives us and is always the sort of guiding light for us.
Yeah. How have libraries changed over the years since you've been involved? Like, has there been any changes? And then, like, how does like the internet and the use of AI and stuff now, like, how does that impact libraries in the future?
Yeah, definitely. No, I
Yeah.
mean, even Palm Harbor Library was, in a small like room in a small building, when it first started out in 1978. It was all volunteer driven. Yeah, there's lots of changes, but certainly technology has had an impact. One thing that I was very impressed by when I was first coming up in libraries and learning about them is how typically libraries as a whole have embraced new technology, sometimes even been on the forefront of technology.
Mm.
So when the internet was booming, initially, we actually lost a lot of librarians to tech companies and companies who are behind like the actual infrastructure of the internet. And so there is that sort of keying in of what is new and what might be helpful.
Yeah.
Um, there was even talk back when like microfilm and microfiche was here. What is this going to mean for print materials? And the same thing has happened with internet and smartphones and all that kind of stuff. And libraries have been very good about adopting technology to make sure that is an access point for people. Access is incredibly important to us.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure that people get what they want as quickly as they can and in the way that they are most comfortable having it. That's why I mentioned my reading habits. I do print books, but I also have the audiobooks and the ebooks on my smartphone, and they're all technologies. Even a book is a technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so how has it changed? I would say the formats the amount of books in a library, those kinds of things have changed. Certainly access to information electronically through databases and through ebook platforms, that's new, but it's not that new for us.
Yeah.
We were early adopters. And the nice thing about my field, the thing that I really get a charge out of, and what I kind of used as my guidepost when I was going through library school, is that there always seems to be this healthy mix of traditional and current, as well as forward thinking when it comes to innovation and what we offer. You mentioned about AI, and that's making its way into the library world just like it is for everybody else.
Yeah.
Because AI can be used in like writing better policies and forming job descriptions. Maybe if we're struggling with how to create activities for a certain type of program, we can rely on these things. It always comes back to the person, because the person has to make the decisions about what to use from that and what not to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there. It's definitely where libraries and librarians are at.
Yeah. Do you see, like myself, when I read a book, like I prefer like reading a print copy, and I don't know if that's just because that's what we grew up with, but like, do you see that ever going away, or do you think there's always going to be like some people that just prefer to have like the physical copy of a book, or does it become audio or just on your phone?
Well, how long have we had treadmills?
I don't know.
Long time though, right?
Yeah.
What, 30, 40 years or
That's
something
true.
like that?
Yeah.
People still run.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I think it'll be around. People like that. I mean,
Yeah.
and there's almost a physiology to reading in that way, because oftentimes I could probably, think back to like when I read Jurassic Park, that book, by Michael Crichton, and remember like when a certain character, I won't spoil for anybody, dies near the end of the book, what part of the page I was at.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? What side of the book and what part of the page did that happen? I still remember that.
Yeah. Crazy.
I mean, why do I remember that?
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah. So you do take it in differently. I just like not having to carry around a bunch of books. That's the advantage
true.
of doing
Yeah.
an ebook.
Yeah.
These days when things get busy, and it's a great privilege to be a director of a library because of how passionate I am about the field, but it's busy.
Yeah.
And so I never know when I'm going to be able to steal 5 minutes, maybe go out to our reading garden at the Palm Harbor Library, and do it there. Or if I'm in my car, and I have 20 minutes before an appointment or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's the handy part of it. But I agree. I mean, there's something very special about holding a book, and I don't think that'll ever go away.
Yeah.
Especially picture books for kids. They've
That's
done a
true.
very good job like capturing some of that experience in the way that things are formatted, because they have to be adaptive when it comes to ebook platforms. We don't know what size or what type of device people are going to be using. But there's still something about those picture books, and I read incessantly to my girls when they were young.
Yeah.
One of your questions to me, like pre-interview questions to me, was about failure. What's one of your failures? And I maybe glossed over that question a little bit because there's too many to list. But one of them occurred to me today, which is about 2 years ago or so. My daughter had just turned 10. My younger daughter just turned 10, and my older daughter was about to turn 13 or 12. I mean, and we were slowly moving away from me reading to them throughout the week or once a week. And there was a time I read to them like 30 minutes a day or 40 minutes a day or something like that. And I finally kind of let that go. And I realized that feels like a failure to me, even though maybe they would have pushed me out or edged me out eventually.
Yeah, at some point, yeah.
Yeah. I thought to myself recently, gosh, I miss that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, picture books, I think especially will be around, and I think there will be a demand for the print book. Also, a little insight for your listeners, and ebooks and ebook platforms and databases, they are expensive, and they go up every year pretty much without fail. Books are relatively cheap.
Yeah.
And so, we're always being mindful of how we spend the taxpayers' money. And so even if it was not still a need, if we didn't still see good circulation from print books, we probably would still be having at least, a good number of them represented on the shelves, because, libraries don't have tons of money. We're not flush.
Right. So we were obviously talking about a bunch of reading books and everything. And I know like the Palm Harbor Library has a summer reading program that's coming up.
That's right.
I want to touch on, I want to, speak to that a little bit. And then also like any other like big programs. I know the library offers a ton, and people can visit the website to get a better idea of like what opportunities and stuff you have there at the library. But maybe some other big programs the library offers that really stick out to you.
I almost took my badge off before we started today because I didn't want it to rattle around, but I've got a little pin here, that's from the Collaborative Summer Learning Program is what it's called. It sets the theme for summer reading every year. The theme this year is Adventure Begins in Your Library. And it's kind of a nod to like outdoor activities. And so we figure out different ways that we kind of incorporate that into the library for those 2 months, June and July. This will be, I think, dropping after our summer reading registration day, which is on June 1st.
Yeah.
But there'll still be plenty to register for. And I want to emphasize for all ages. It's very easy to think, oh, the library's for kids.
Yeah.
Because it is, there's so many great kids things for libraries, that are happening in our area. But we really make great efforts to have for older kids, for teens, for what we might call new adults, like Jackson.
Yeah. There you go.
Who's, wise beyond his years when it
Yeah.
comes to ocean life and life in general. And then of course for older adults as well, we try to run the gamut when it comes to that. A few specifics, we're going to be having a fundraiser on July 19th. We did a fundraiser last year. We only try to only do a couple a year. But last year was Christmas in July. And so this year we thought we'd follow it up with Summerween. So it's sort of a Halloween during the
Cool.
summertime.
Yeah.
So there's for a small fee, I think it's maybe 20 for adults and 5 for kids. And it's a 2-hour after hours event. We've been doing more and more of these after hours events. And there's going to be just tons and tons and tons of activities going on for everybody, to come and take advantage of. And for adults also looking for like a sort of a partial night out, especially if their parents. I know that's a hard thing to find sometimes. There will be a limited number of free drink tickets that come with your admission, so that you can enjoy that as well. And there'll be some live music and a costume contest for all ages and that kind of thing. And then we also have these virtual author talks. You've heard of what is it? Good artists borrow, great artists steal. That adage. So we kind of stole this from the Dunedin Public Library because they were doing it as well, using this library speakers consortium to basically bring in these huge authors to come in and well, not come in. It's a virtual, it's a virtual author talk.
Yeah.
And so just coming up in let's see. So June 13th, there's psychological thrillers with Frida McFadden. And then skipping ahead a little bit to July to like a kid's author, Mercy Watson and Kate DiCamillo. Kate DiCamillo is a huge author in the children's world, and that's going to be on July 9th. And that's just 2 of several that we're going to be having every month. And it's, just part of your library card experience. And you can you don't even have to come in. You can just go online and register and get access. And the entire back catalog is available for people and big authors. One that keeps coming to the surface is, I'm going to forget his name. He played on that. Do you remember that show Full House?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I forget what his name is, that actor, but he did one pretty recently.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So there's that's a great way to kind of enjoy an author talk without actually having to leave your bedroom or your living room.
Yeah. And circling back to like the use of technology and stuff and the
That's right.
further enhancement of.
And I'll throw a little tip out there. If y'all have not done a virtual program through the library before, and it's something you want to try and you want to make it more of a immersive experience. If you've not done this before, try learning how to cast or mirror from your device. Let's say you're doing it from your laptop or your smartphone or your tablet, and you're in the actual live session with the author, and you want to be able to see it on the big screen. You should have a way of connecting that to your smart TV if you have a smart TV, or one of those boxes, like Apple TV or Roku.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to enjoy some of those library programs, which may kind of enhance the experience a little bit. And then if you are enjoying it live, you'll be able to kind of chime in questions and it's like any big author event. Maybe not all questions will get answered, but
Right.
you might be one of the lucky ones.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I was going to mention is we have this other after hours event called the Ephrata Concert Series. And so there's going to be Beatles music being celebrated and played on Friday, that's June 7th. Rats. That's before
Okay.
we
Yep.
drop.
Yeah.
Well, there's going to be future ones of those as well. So
Yeah. And we'll promote it in our newsletter and stuff too.
sounds
So
great.
yeah. All right. So I have a couple of things, a couple of stats that I wrote down that I found interesting. That I just want to get your feedback on or just reaction to, right? So the first library opened in 1790 with books donated from Benjamin Franklin. So they've been around for a long time.
Long time.
Yeah, pretty cool. And this one was pretty remarkable.
He was not the only founding father. Thomas Jefferson is largely responsible for what eventually became the Library of Congress, and Adams as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Andrew Carnegie donated 55 million in his time. Now they're saying it would have been worth 1.6 billion in today's dollars to open 22,509 libraries. That's insane.
It is insane. And Carnegie is a good example of giving. What legacy you can have. I've been fortunate. We're very fortunate at the Palm Harbor Library because we get private donations occasionally, and we need them. We really need them. And that, we've been talking about the foundation and how we can kind of grow it. And I think it's important to know, there's always the nice thing about giving, but it's nice to have your name on something or to know that you've done something that will outlast you. And Carnegie got that. And I encourage you to look up and see. I don't know where our closest Carnegie library is to here, but I've been in some of those Carnegie libraries, and some of them have been well kept and some of them have not, but they're always very interesting. And just the idea of being in this 110-year-old building, 120-year-old building, that was given to the community because he felt it was an important thing to have, and it's still standing. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. Got a lot of Florida homes that are not still standing because like Jackson was talking about, in the recent episode about docks going away from the hurricanes and houses being effective, and it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
So but I didn't know that stat, so I'm glad you shared that with me.
Yeah, it's a huge number, right? And but it doesn't have to be that big of a number to make an impact, right?
That's
for your local community. So cool. Matthew, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. I appreciate the invite.